I thought what was interesting about that is like it's a precursor to punk, really, isn't it? Like, I mean, you might have had the New York Dolls and maybe the Stooges, and maybe the Ramones floating about in '75, but like it was almost like a lighting the top of the dynamite for what punk was yet to become.
We didn't know the Ramones. I loved the New York Dolls. I liked the Velvets. I wasn't too aware of the Stooges. So what I was listening to a lot were early Roxy Music, the Dolls, the Velvets. The Velvets, not so much. I was confused by what Lou Reed was doing, like, you know, wonderful songs like New Age and Sunday, Sunday and things like that. I loved, but they confused me. I didn't know why I liked them so much. I didn't understand that they were sort of so fresh and new. They sounded old, but fresh and new. And I mean, you know, like, you've got to contextualize 1975. You know, the thing is, one, we're Irish, so that's really important and boring for anyone not Irish. So in London, 76, 77, in England, UK, you had 27% inflation. That's it. The economy's over. Like, there's no jobs with that happening. In New York, you had a bankrupt city. You know, the police didn't police. The fire brigade never answered your calls, and you could hardly drive for the potholes. Now, I know that because it was there. It was bankrupt, and the American president said New York City dropped dead on television when they asked for help. In Ireland, again, you're too young, but, you know, there was zero economy, none, as per normal. Migration was part of the economic plan. But worse than that was this terrible claustrophobia of silence, this sort of national suffocation. And why was that? Why were we all quiet and silent? It's almost as if we were ashamed of the place, because in the north of the island, there was in effect a civil war. We called it the Troubles, like it was a minor dose of political flu. In fact, it was 3,600 people murdered. The government in the Republic were at least tacitly supporting, if not overtly supporting. They were wholly corrupt. The church knew about it. Of course they did, and were generally silent, except for a few brave priests. Meanwhile, they were busily abusing the children of the parishioners, and the business community was making money out of everything. And yet, we all shut up about this, you know, and it got to a point where enough was enough. And we didn't set out to be the ones that would necessarily be noisy about it, but, you know, we were very young, we were offered no future, the place stunk and was putrid with corruption. And so the minute we got on telly, I kicked off. And there was another generation watching that, you know, Bono and Sinead, and I don't know if on the north they were watching the Late Late Show, but basically everybody watched it. Mm-hmm. And you know, I think it was I don't say we kicked it off or we were the precursor to anything in Ireland, but finally, like, you know, just enough now, enough. And that had a huge impact. And then when we came here in the middle of 76, the Pistols had been forming during the early days of 76 and were now coming out of their chrysalis. And
did you
the Ramones had arrived. Huh?
Did you rate the Pistols? Because I know, like, so some like
I completely rated the album. I thought it was like I still do. It's one of the absolute best rock and roll records ever made, in my view. We were on a sampler record of all the new bands. So the new bands were Blondie, the Ramones, the Talking Heads, the Vibrators, the Damned, Richard Hell. This was a sampler called New Wave, and our record was looking after number one. The Pistols weren't on that, but really no one knew these bands. So in the first gigs we did in the UK, we did them with the Talking Heads and the Ramones, and we played in schools in the afternoon.
That's incredible. Thinking about that now, like those three bands are so, like, you know, seminal and so influential to like probably two generations of musicians that have come since.
It was, I mean, I thought it was crap. I didn't know what we were doing. 4 in the afternoon in these gymnasiums with the light just streaming in, you know.
So you're telling me you and David Byrne were like probably getting changed in a canteen?
We were all in the classroom, the three of us, and Joey Ramone would always have boiling water, and he'd put a towel over his head, and he'd be inhaling the steam, for his delicate vocals. What? And like he'd come up and his hair would be wringing wet. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "No, like, New York, Queens, he says, you got to do this." And I've done it ever since, from that day, from Joey telling me that's what you got to do with your voice. But in front of us were these like 150 bemused, fourth formers or something, in mullets and Bay City roller outfits or school uniforms. And they thought we were shit, They couldn't get their head. The ones that they hated most were the talking heads. They could not get their heads around the short hair, the Lacoste T-shirts.
Yeah.
And clearly you couldn't follow the Ramones. This is, for me, one of the greatest bands, I've ever seen. And so it ended up with the Talking Heads first, the Rats second, the Ramones third. I think we only did about 4 or 5 gigs before everyone just thought enough. But imagine the schools letting us do that. I don't know how we got the gigs.
I don't remember anything like that happening since. Like, I mean, I went to Christian Brothers School in Oma, and I think like the most music that we ever got was either maybe the time my band played once, and then the other time would be like when Brother Goff would stand up and sing hymns and put ashes on your head. It's probably, but it's like, yeah, I mean, even like talking about school, like we both went to sort of Catholic schools in different eras. Like I went to Christian Brothers School. It was quite sport focused. It was quite jockey, with big GAA. Just big sport, and I didn't particularly enjoy it. Like, I think you kind of had a similar experience in Blackrock College, didn't you?
Yeah, ours was at the big rugby school. I mean, the basic job of the school was to be the feeder for the Irish national rugby team, in effect. And I mean, it's got a big reputation, the school, not just for rugby, but just as a school. And the old man was spending every penny he had trying to get me and my sisters a good education. I mean, he wasn't making any money. He sold towels around the countryside of Ireland in the 50s and 60s. So, how much money can you make driving your car around selling towels and that? So he'd leave on Monday and come back on Friday. So the net result was, obviously I did no work. My mum was dead. So I didn't do any homework. So I got into trouble at school.
What sort of trouble did you get into? Because like if you're in school and you don't want to be there at that age, you're just going to act out. Like, I mean, I know myself from getting suspended and things like over the years that you'll lash out or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I got beaten every day. I can't remember a day when I wasn't beaten, and I was a low-level pain in the arse. I wasn't a disruptive influence, save by this sort of monolithic silence glowering from the back, or smart arse questions or comments, or just irritating things. The Kinks were huge, and I loved the Kinks. And the Kinks used to wear their ties. You had to wear a tie, I think, like now. And instead of putting the tie through the last loop, so it looked like a tie at the top, they just flipped their tie over so it looked like, just like not a knot.
Yeah.
And, so I went into school with this thing, and they'd say, "What's that, Geldof?" And I'd say, "It's a tie, Father." And he'd say, "Take that thing off." And then when I'd take it off, I'd say, "Where's your tie?" And I'd hold it up. And he'd say, "Put it on properly." So I'd put it on, but I'd do the Kinks knot again thing. So I'd be sent home. But what I'd do is I'd buy a bit of fabric at McCullough's Dunleary for 6pence, just enough, a cut off. And I'd go home and I'd machine on the Singer sewing machine. I'd just sew the back up and come back with a different tie. And psychedelia was beginning, so I'd get these hideous lurid coloured fabrics and come in with, these completely bonkers ties. but it was a tie. So they were torn between, you know, they'd say, what's that? And I'd say, it's a tie. But like, you know, it was annoying in class. And now the Battle of Waterloo, 1840, they'd be staring down at the back of this sort of glaring tie sort of thing. So you get kicked out of class for wearing a lurid tie, which sounds fun, but it was crap. Then I wouldn't play sports because I didn't like it, and also I didn't want to cooperate. So that was, again, a black mark. We had a report card every week where you got up to 9. 9 was the maximum per subject. If you got everything over 6, you were on the honours list. If you got 3 5s, you were on the blacklist, and your name was read out to the school. I was on the blacklist the whole time. I was the president of the debating society. Hello. But
of course you were.
I wouldn't wear the school blazer to the away matches, so I wasn't allowed to travel with the debating team. So that was useless. And then my own man made me become a boarder in an attempt to try and get me to pass some exams. And it was during the 1968 revolutions, you know, and Mao Zedong. So I imported books from China, Mao's Little Red Book, you know, but I got them in Vietnamese because it was during the Vietnam War. And I had boxes of these things, and I gave them out to all the other boys in school. And so the political police called on the school, the head of the school, and my own man and I was called in, and I got kicked out, being a boarder, for being a bad communist influence on the school and shit like that, you know. It just went on, you know.
Were the rats, were any of them at Blackrock College as well, or was that more of a Dún Laoghaire thing, like where you would like hang out there?
No, I mean, the interesting thing is that those of you who watched the documentary on BBC a couple of weeks ago, what I didn't understand about the band, and you know, when you're looking at a past of yourself, the only comparison it maybe is if you're watching old movies or old videos of yourself as a kid in the family. You think it's cute, and you might remember it, but you're looking at yourself at 4 or 5, and you think, yeah, cute, you know, but it's sort of you at a distance. You can't really associate with that individual. That's really the effect of the documentary. What I hadn't understood was that none of us had a family, and I think that ended up being important. So, as I said, my dad was away a week. I didn't get on with him at all. Essentially, he was kind of a stranger because of that. My mum died when I was 7 or something, so she wasn't around. So there was no family. The others, Jerry, the guitar player, I had no idea about this until a year and a half ago when I saw the rough cut of this, that he came from a brutally dysfunctional family. I mean, really bad. No idea. He was very quiet. The music he played was a lot of folk blues, you know, really well. Blind Gary Davis, Mississippi John Hurt, these sort of people. That's what I liked about him. He was quiet, married, very young, still the same woman. And then the others were all packed off to boarding school at really young ages. So Pete Briquette came from Ballyjames-Duff in County Cavan, and he was sent to a boarding school, I think in North Dublin. The others were, so none of them actually had that family thing, but I didn't know that. So it's kind of weird that we more or less clung together rather than you're bound together with ambition, which is what a lot of bands do. You know, they find a uniformity in music and desire and ambition. We kind of needed to be a group. So we all lived together in one house. It was sort of like the Beatles in A Hard Day's Night. You know, we lived in Chessington, all of us, the crew, the band, girlfriends, wives, transient people coming and going for a long time. That's the first thing. And the second thing that I thought was weird was because of that, I think, there was this this anger and this deep rage, because if you'd hear what the guys say now, and we didn't talk to each other about it, we separate interviews, all of them say at the beginning that, you know, the director said, what did you want to get at? What did you want to do with your life? Gary says, I wanted to play my guitar and drive my motorbike both loud and fast and get
Yeah.
the fuck out of Ireland.